So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to Umbar, or at least the closest representation of Umbar that we have got in the, just generally the Reforged, well, not just the Reforged community, but the entirety of the Medieval 2 Lord of the Rings modding community, I think. I don't think we've ever had a version of Umbar that has been as impressive as this, which this is sort of more of a cityscape map as well. It's not really built to be a siege as such. I mean, it is a siege, of course, but it's built to be sort of a siege which takes place more within the city itself rather than it being sort of an army attacking the city. We have seen that in scenarios in the past, but certainly all of the action does tend to take place within the city itself, which is quite interesting. Definitely a map which prioritises that more so than its outer defences, which is probably for the best because the outer defences are quite one-dimensional, whereas what happens within the city, across the river and the like, is a little bit more interesting. This is also a map, however, which has had a couple of crashing issues in the past, because you can see from here all of the many fences which exist within Umbar's city limits, so we'll see. That hasn't been an issue recently, but I doubt it's gone away. Hopefully this battle is not quite so taxing. Stuff like the changes to the ranges and stuff for stability purposes should probably help us out in that regard. Regardless, it is also a themed battle today, as the Black Númenóreans and their Southron allies try to defend what they hold of the city, while the Gondorians and their Dol Amrothian vassals also lay siege to it. So it'll be quite interesting this. Gondor and Umbar are two infantry powerhouses, albeit with Umbar being slightly more aggressive, with slightly better line infantry to base their army around and slightly more options when it comes to aggressive infantry. Gondor a little bit more defensive with their very powerful armour-piercing polearms and very heavy Gondorian plate. The cavalry for Dol Amroth also could come into play here as well, and then obviously the Haradrim bringing a lot of armour-piercing to the table, which will be very useful for the defenders. We'll go through the attackers first and foremost, however, starting off with Morn Adel, who's going to be playing as the first of the Gondorian armies today. It's got some Gondor infantry with the first level of armour upgrades. When you're on the attack and when you outnumber the defenders, of course, your individual armies will be slightly weaker as a general rule, so you may have to save money in places. And just going for the first level of armour upgrade is very understandable. Gondor's armour upgrades are cheaper anyway, so it's basically half price to get each upgrade, so you can get the full upgrade for the same price that you would spend on a normal faction's armour upgrades. But if you have to save money somewhere, units like this, it's not the worst idea to, because they're still going to be tanky with that armour upgrade, very difficult to skirmish down. They may not be able to defeat stuff like the Alcarondas Legion in melee, but they're a good backbone to have for your army here in this situation, the Gondor infantry, because cavalry is less of a concern, so the spears, standard spears anyway, probably not going to see as much of. And also the unupgraded Gondor infantry, so just the mail and tabards, which are going to be there as well. Got some Guards of Osgiliath, so the only unit of actual full-on pikemen that Gondor have available to them. They're kind of similar in terms of quality to something like the Uruk-hai pikemen as well, only you can actually bring less of them. It isn't as much of a problem for Gondor as you might expect, though, because Gondor have got plenty of other things that can do a similar job to the Guards of Osgiliath. But it is still important to have that long range that a pike offers in this kind of situation. Speaking of which, it's this unit really which means that they're only having one dedicated pike is not really too much of a problem. The mighty Fountain Guard, this is also something that Umbar, infantry powerhouses though they may be, don't really have an equivalent to the Fountain Guard. In fact, I would say that really nothing in the game is the equivalent of the Fountain Guard at the moment. An armour-piercing unit, I mean, the First Legion pikes over in Khazad-dûm are basically just a better version because they have the range of pikes in addition to the armour-piercing. But that's kind of a different matter because they're extremely expensive. The Fountain Guard is still quite costly, of course, but it's kind of a different matter altogether, and also you can have multiple Fountain Guardsmen. So it's definitely a real boon for Gondor, definitely something they have which is largely unique. Pelargir Marines, in a situation like this where choke points are likely to be the order of the day, having javelins to try and break those up is going to be important, especially given the armour that Umbar in particular can pack on. They're nothing special in regards to javelins, the Pelargir Marines. In fact, they're very much sort of what you could consider to be the average javelin unit. They're better than the cheap stuff you get from the Orc factions. They're not quite as devastating as some of the really high-end stuff like the Ferodrim javelins or the Demons of the Desert, certainly, which we may see today. So yeah, Pelargir Marines here to just help and support the push. A few units of Gondor archers as well, some standard ones, so they're going to be here to skirmish. I mean, certainly between Gondor and Umbar, it's very much two immovable objects when it comes to their skirmish forces. The standard Gondor archers will do fine in a skirmish fight. They obviously won't be as good as the higher end units from both factions, but still, you've got to cut corners somewhere when you're on the attack in a situation. such as this. And he has got a unit of marksmen of Andros as well, who are maybe not quite as good in a skirmish fight as something like the Balakith marksmen, especially with their upgrade because they have a shield value, but they do make up for that by being slightly better in melee, which of course in a siege like this could very much come into play. He does actually have some Gondor spearmen on both flanks as well, with varying levels of... Actually no, they're both just unupgraded. And then at the back here he also has some Citadel Guard and some civilians, which I would imagine that's where his general is in the civilians, just so he can keep them back for the late game and uses other units more freely. Citadel Guard, obviously armor-piercing spears. Interesting to see no multiple HP units as such, so he's gone a little bit more of a quantity, which I actually quite like. Someone on the attackers has always got to do that, at least one army, I think, otherwise you can end up entrapping yourself in having too small of an army when you're trying to assault a position. We have Steward of Dale, who's the player who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. He's fully upgraded his Gondor infantry, so they're going to be very resilient against standard damage and against any archers that they may perceive. Though, of course, Umbar do have armour-piercing options available to them, and in terms of quality, their line infantry unit, the Alcarondas Legion, are very much superior to the Gondor infantry, so that is a potential problem, but again, it's a nice base to have around your army because they are tanky enough in multiple situations. Citadel Guard and Guards of Osgiliath on the front again, so some more pikes as well as some more armour-piercing on those spears. The Citadel Guard are actually going to be important in this battle, I think, because they are more expensive than the Alcarondas Legion, and you can bring fewer of them, but they can go toe-to-toe with them, as well as having all the benefits that spears entail, because of that armour-piercing they have. Pelagia Marines are also in here, so once again, nice supporting tool. More Citadel Guard and Guards of Osgiliath. He's punted for some fully upgraded Axemen of Lasarnak as well, which I do quite like, certainly because of the Umbar presence on the field today to really break up some of their heavier units. It can really help to have some genuine damage dealers, which Gondor isn't hugely well stocked with. They have 2 units of shock infantry, not counting any skirmishers that pull out a two-handed weapon. But yeah, the Axemen of Lasarnak I think are the better option in this case because they are cheaper and the armour piercing I think is going to be more useful. The Haradrim may be on the field, but you can deal with them through other means I think than the Ravenhelms. A ballista, which can be used to shoot nicely across the river should Umbar try to get into a dug-in position. Veterans of Osgiliath, the other sort of really high-end Gondor skirmisher, which should be able to out-skirmish 1-to-1 actually. Most of what Umbar have, I think the Naruna Aru Royal Guard would probably still be victorious in a skirmish fight with them. But the veterans are also, again, better than the Umbar equivalent in melee, which could come into play later on. I think they also are unbreakable, which is something. And do they cause fear, or is it a morale boosting effect? It's one of the two. So they've got sort of a lot going on here. They're a deceptively versatile unit, I think. Something else that Umbar don't have at their disposal is an armour-piercing archer, which the Wardens of Minas Ithil are. So they can obviously pick and choose their target should they get into range. They may be multiple HP, but their armour actually is, by Gondorian standards at least, relatively low. And they could be, well, they will be one of the primary sort of sources for Umbar's arrow fire if they get too close. So definitely something they should save for later on, I think, in the Steward of Dale's army here. And his general's bodyguard is the Wardens of the White Tower. So he's decided to go for the Sword and Board today. They're good, they're just a little bit underwhelming next to other units of a similar type, like the Royal Legion of Armenelos, any of the Dwarven units. And also they have less men than the Nimlothians, so that is something to bear in mind. He also actually has some more Gondor Spearmen out here, again fully upgraded with more Axemen. He's also gone for some cavalry as well, which is interesting considering you'd imagine that Dol Amroth could have handled that. And he's even upgraded their armour as well, the Pinnith Galen cavalry, Lancers as well. I don't know whether he's going to be able to use them effectively. Maybe he can get them across the river quickly and maybe try and cut off the armies over there, but they're going to have to move very quickly if they're going to be able to do that. We have Filler, who is playing as Dol Amroth. He's upgraded his Doran Ernil pikemen. It'll make them a little bit tankier, but they're still going to be one of the units which any of the defending skirmishers really can pick apart quite nicely. But it is important for Dol Amroth to bring the Doran Ernil pikes, I think, because it does make up for some of their deficiencies in melee, shall we say. I think of all the factions on display today, their infantry is the least impressive, or at least it's the easiest to counter. Whether it be Umbar's just outright quality or Harad's AP, they're not going to be too concerned about what Dol Amroth brings to the table, at least in their sort of rank and file. But the pikes can at least make them a little bit more of a tricky target to engage, as of course can the halberdiers, which will be a concern for Umbar. Umbar have got all of the tools they need to really counteract this, should they position themselves correctly, but it's still something they need to watch out for, because as halberdiers go, they're actually very, very nice. Back here, some Tarnostian spearmen just to fill things out. They're not quite as good as the equivalent Gondorians, but still they'll do a much the same job. He's got his general and a unit of dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan. They're actually, the Wardens of the White Tower are significantly stronger actually than the Knights of the Silver Swan, but they're a good supporting unit to have in and amongst your army, and they are tanky at the very least, but don't expect them to get tons and tons of kills in the way that a sword and board sort of high-end unit with multiple HP can get. That is worth bearing in mind. Perithil Champions and Black Swan Renegades, a couple of them each, so AP as well as base damage and fear. That will be good. I mean, if they're deployed later on, they could prove to be sort of a real nice power spike for the attackers, but we'll see when they're committed. A couple of units of the standard Athalond men-at-arms. Again, very similar to sort of regular Western line infantry. They'll be outclassed by Umbar, and the armour piercing of Harad will make it difficult for them, but they're not here to win the battle, they're here to make up the numbers. Some upgraded Doran Ernal archers as well, so more skirmish potential, which is nice. They're just here to be rank and file again, and Tirithea marksmen, so he's gone actually for quite a lot in terms of his archers. He's got a little bit of cavalry. I mean, he's got some Belfast Marines, which are very much the same sort of thing as the Pelagia, only they have an axe in melee with all of the ups and downs that entails. He also has some Perithil Horse Guard, which are a unit of melee cavalry, which will be useful defensively. It'll be nice to sort of try and counteract any cavalry that the enemy may have, depending on what sort of cavalry that is. And finally, the third and final Gondorian army, commanded by Torres. He has got a couple of units of the Fountain Guard. Again, nice to have because it's something that really there isn't really a direct answer to it. Gondor Militia Infantry just to make up the numbers. Again, nice to have just to sort of surround your more important units with some numbers. He's got some upgraded Gondor Cavalry actually, so once again, interesting to see how the attackers decide to use their cavalry, because the defenders will clearly try and form up as quickly as they can. There's more militia in there, there's more Pelagia Marines in there. Back here he's got some upgraded Gondor Spearmen, the first level anyway, and the first level of upgrades on the Axemen of Lasarnak as well, so more AP and more line units. He's got some Athelian Rangers, so he's the only one actually to bring a unit of Rangers, I believe, for Gondor, unless some of them are hidden, but that's actually, I quite like that, to be honest with you. Rangers are not going to be around in the mod indefinitely. The next patch will remove the glut of body piercing that there is in the game at the moment. So it actually pays, I think, to not get too comfortable with the idea that these will be able to do a large amount of the killing in a situation like this, whether on the attack or the defence, but they're still here in this army for now. Some veterans of Osgiliath with the first level of armour upgrade, looking bloody and bruised, but very scary nonetheless. Wardens of the White Tower, and then several units of Gondor infantry and archers as well, so lots of rank and file with a few standouts in there as well. Now then, we have Ragnar, who's going to be playing as the first of the Umbar forces today. He's got some Corsair Blackguards. They can do much more damage than the Pelagia and Belfalas Marines on the other side, but they have less ammunition as well. But then another upside is that they are better in melee also, so it swings and roundabouts really. Personally, I prefer the Blackguards because the damage they do is more immediate and they have more utility later. But that's just me. There's a hidden unit here which could very well be crossbows or rangers. Regardless of which it is, they'll be very useful. Crossbows, of course, are something Gondor don't really have of their own. Some Belagair archers, so Umbar, of course, are very comfortable in a skirmish fight. Balakith marksmen for much the same reason, albeit they aren't armour upgraded, so they might be slightly worse in that sense, but the Naruna Ari Royal Guard need no upgrade. They already have the hugely impressive armour values that they are known for. A catapult crew, with the catapults themselves, pushed by some Southrons. We've got some Balakith Axe Guard, really a must-bring against Gondor and Dol Amroth when they're working together, because armour piercing is going to be universally useful. Alcarondas Legion, again, a must-bring really in most situations, because if you're fighting a faction with stronger infantry than you, you'll need the quality that these guys offer to at least delay them sufficiently so that you can win in other ways. But if you're facing a faction of lower quality, they'll outright win you the fight if the opponent doesn't do anything significant. Ardenayam Shield Guard are here, as well as the Belagair Pikemen, so a lot of heavier units back here. Interesting mix, to say the least. And I think, no, this is actually part of the Haradrim army over here, so Mason Pakerns. He has got some Serpent Guard, very fast moving lancers, but they're actually going to be quite difficult to use on this occasion, because I think if the Pineth Galens catch up to them, they'll win in melee. The Gondor Cavalry are spear cav, so it's going to be tough if they get into that fight as well, but especially the Perithil Horse Guard. You want to stay away from Dol Amroth's melee cavalry. That's one of the premier features of their faction. He's got a lot of Southron Warband. Quality-wise, they may not be that amazing. The armour and shield values are not that good either, but the armour piercing really makes this unit, They're not overly expensive, they're still capable of chipping away at really high armour factions like Gondor, so definitely a good pick. And also the Serpent Guard, who, especially when they're upgraded like this, are actually the superior of the Gondor infantry as well because of the damage and the melee defense that they have. They are more expensive to boot, so you know there is a case for saying that maybe over-investing in a unit like this is at the expense of some of the really nasty stuff that Harad can bring. But we'll see. They are on the defence, so they've got a bit more money to play with. Southron Pikemen and Beast Tamers to form up a Southron Phalanx. This is where Gondor and Dol Amroth will really struggle, though. Probably one of the best units against a lot of the Western Kingdoms, to be honest with you, in general, is the Trollmen of Harad. The armour piercing that they do, the tankiness that they have in comparison to a lot of other sort of lightly armoured heavy shock units is significant, to say the least. Muhad Beast Hunters, I was about to say Mason Beast Hunters then, because of his name. But yeah, Javelins are something Harad is also known for. Speaking of which, Demons of the Desert, again, really, really devastating unit. One of those skirmishers in the game that you really have to be on the lookout for because they can tear a hole right through your army. Maybe not quite as devastating as the Witchers or the Iron Watch of Mirrormere or even the Blackbook Engineers, but you know, it's still a problem that you have to watch out for. Champions of Nephrat as well, which is not the General's Bodyguard actually, but they're extremely devastating as well to armoured units. Southron Archers in here. Umbar can of course handle the lion's share of the skirmishing, but it always helps to at least help your allies out there. And actually the General is going to be in the Haradrim Spearmen, so they're going to be kept at the back presumably. And then finally, the second of the Umbar armies, played by Son of the Dunedain. So he clearly thinks that the Númenórean blood needs to be returned, playing as Umbar. Alcarondas Legion, who can argue as well. I have to say that while the Ardanaim are good looking in Divide and Conquer, I do prefer the Umbar aesthetic in Reforged, especially for a unit like this. I really like the Alcarondas Legion. Just a fantastic looking unit, and a fantastic unit mechanically as well. He's got his Balakith Marksman, again unupgraded, which is interesting to see. Balagai Footmen to pad things out, more Ardanaim Shield Guard, some Corsair Blackguards back here. He's actually got some Shield Bearers as well, which is nice to see. Nice base man. A little bit more defensive, probably the Axe Guard are more effective overall, but I do like the aesthetic of those Mace Men. He has got some Archers and some Naaru Royal Guard, and I think that's it, is it not? Yeah, that's his General. There's nothing else down here. Well, there is actually something back there. There is some Naaru Sentinels who have been left behind, but they can very quickly just make their way up here. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, interesting matchup this. I've always said that Gondor and Harad are one of those fascinating matchups that you often see. Gondor and Umbar as well, for different reasons. It's because they have a lot of the same focuses. Dol Amroth, I think, are kind of the ugly duckling here, as in a siege sense anyway. They do have some Wanderers of Nimrodel, to be fair, which is a very useful unit to have in a situation like this. But certainly when it comes to their infantry, they do have their strengths. They have some really nice heavy swordsmen. They have pikes which are more massable than the Gondorian Guards of Osgiliath. But time and time again we've seen people go infantry heavy with Dol Amroth, and for good reason. They end up on the back foot. And Umbar and Harad, while they have very different philosophies when it comes to their melee, the armour piercing and the quality together, you would imagine to be a bit of a problem. And it'll be interesting to see what sort of how well the Gondorians can do in this situation, because they are well known for being one of those really strong infantry-based factions as well, which means in a siege they're often very, very nice. But more so in a slower sense, more so in a more defensive mindset, which is obviously very thematic for Gondor, but can they be as resilient as they will need to be in the face of all of Harad's AP and all of Umbar's quality when it comes to their Black Númenórean units? Obviously when it comes to the Balagai, Umbar won't have much of a problem. Neither will Dol Amroth, to be fair. The Balagai are very much the rank and file of Umbar's Haven. No Corsairs in the army today. So obviously they've been driven out as Torres' army begins to cross the river. And obviously a unit like this in the late game, the Fountain Guard, would be very tough for either faction to deal with, but perhaps even more so for Umbar, because that armour piercing on the Fountain Guard really does have a sting to it. Obviously stuff like the Gondor Militia Infantry is going to be reasonably easy to keep at arm's length, but all of Gondor's units tend to have that tankiness to them as the Perithal Horse Guard barge their way through as well. I don't know if these mounted units are really going to be able to pay for themselves. You can see the Penith Galens are also coming across here as well. I mean, the only thing that you can say really for them is they should guarantee that that one unit of Harad Serpent Guard that is mounted shouldn't really be able to get too much in the way of value. But 3 units of cavalry, I think maybe, depending on what you wanted to use them for, if you felt like you could catch up to these units as they were outside, then just going for a couple of units of really fast lancers would have been enough. If you were intending to just stop the defenders from sallying out with their cav, then really just allowing Dol Amroth to bring 1 unit of Perithil Horse Guard would have been enough. I don't think the Gondorian cavalry nor the Penith Galens were really necessary, but we'll see. Late on they could still be useful once the defence starts to flag and gaps start to appear. Cavalry getting in behind the lines at that point can really be a problem. Meanwhile, as we look down from on high, some Gondorians are starting to cross the bridges through the middle as well. Some Gondor infantry in the vanguard, fully upgraded as they are. Tricky to skirmish down. We also have what's going on over here. Sort of a wide berth being given here. Morn Adel. So are they actually going to cross the river and instead try primarily, instead of moving through the city, are they going to try and attack the outer reaches of the settlement? I mean, I don't think it really matters. I think maybe they should be going evenly. They should have one of their armies going up this way, maybe one going around the back over here, and then a couple of them crossing the bridges over here, and starting to head up this way as well. It's going to be difficult, I would say. Digging in on this side of the river. Actually, this side of the river we don't actually get to see an awful lot of. There is another defensive position that you can take up over here, and there is actually, it is a long choke point should you decide to take advantage of it. It technically extends all the way back over to here, I think. That would be quite the long way to march, but it doesn't look as though the defenders are going to use that. They're instead going to use this area here to consolidate their armies, which is fair enough. Meanwhile, Balagire archers are getting into position. Are they going to skirmish? Looking through the trees over there, we can see there is a unit of Gondorian infantry loitering, but not much in the way of ranged threats at the moment. And if the Axemen of Lasarnak start crossing the river, armour upgrades or no, that will still be all the invitation Son of the Dunedain needs to start opening up with his archers. Still the armies start to move in, so I think we will go up to ×2 speed for the moment, because I would imagine, I mean, it's an unenviable task, I have to say, for the Steward of Dale in this situation, because he is being basically told to march right into the teeth of this defence, more or less alone, unless Morn Hadel sends a wing of his army to at least support him. I think he's going to be the whipping boy for his team, unfortunately. But someone has to do that job most of the time when they're on the attack in a siege, so maybe this time will be no different. Balagire footmen moving forward as well. Of course, the longer that the attackers take to get into position, which it will take quite a long time should they... I think, yeah, Morn Hadel has been... I assume he's been told to turn around by his team. And I do agree with this, to be honest with you, because I think 2 armies on the other side of the river is enough to pressurise the 2 choke points at the back. Over here, though, if you leave Steward of Dale to his own devices, he's going to ultimately run out of manpower, and then they'll be able to turn around everything to the back edge of the settlement. You need to pressurise every angle that you can for as long as you can. And I think it's in their best interest to move over with more through the river, and through the town itself. Beast Tamers moving forward. Demons of the Desert are down here as well. Interesting to see how the defenders set the table here. When outnumbered, after all, I often give the advantage to the attackers, and this time will be no different. Son of the Dunedain and Steward of Dale are 2 names that I've seen several times before, but everyone else in this lobby I have seen the names before, but not as often, so there's no sort of massive skew when it comes to the relative experience of both teams, I don't think. We shall see then. That will become apparent as the battle continues, should the battle actually get underway sometime soon. They've actually pulled back quite a long way here, the defenders, which is a little bit interesting. I mean, I can see why they've decided to go over here, because you get natural protection from enemy arrow fire because of the rocks. Whereas going down over here, of course, if you were to set up a phalanx line over here, you could just get a unit of archers over here and shoot to the side of them. But it is a very inviting position to be in. There actually is also a little... I mean, it's a long way off, so you're probably not going to get anything in the way of a ranged advantage over the defenders over here. So you wouldn't be able to support Steward of Dale and ultimately Morn Adele's armour. Not army, not armour. Meanwhile, we do actually have a bit of skirmishing over here. You can see how quick the Serpent Guard were, because they managed to sort of slip the net there. All 3 units of cavalry given the runaround, really, by the very swift Southron cavalry. That is the danger. This is the real benefit of having a cavalry force like this. Cardlin's cavalry force is not dissimilar. Rohan, of course, are pretty much entirely based around it. The question is, what can they charge into? What can they do damage to? I mean, Dol Amroth's army is in transition. If they can hit something like the Wanderers of Nimrodel, it would be worth doing. They can't afford to linger too long now, because the Gondor archers are starting to shoot into them. And from the back, the Serpent Guard are not the most well-armoured unit of this type anyway. And in fact, they do end up getting caught by the Gondor cavalry in the end. So that damage they were taking from the archers does have an impact. The dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan are here, though. Could this be a general assassination? No, it doesn't look like it. They're going to instead go for the archers. Lances do come down. Kind of. They got their lances out, which does mean I think the charge will connect. That's a lot of damage done to the Doran Ernal archers there. A bit done to the Tirithea marksmen also. And once again they slip away, getting caught on the rocks a little bit. I mean, and they do end up routing in the end. As a result of getting caught on the rocks and then mobbed by all of this cavalry, they do rout. They should come back, though. There's enough of them, unless they decide to run them down here, the attackers, which would actually be a good idea, I think, because the last thing you want is this unit coming back from routing and then being kept on the red line and forgetting about them until the end. Started off reasonably well, but in the end, the terrain of the map, the rocks got in the way of their retreat, and ultimately when you send a lone cavalry unit into this situation, the morale is going to fall apart more oft than not. Meanwhile, Balaguer archers retreating now that the Steward of Dale's Gondorians are starting to move forward. He's got some axemen of the Sarnak here as well. Gondor spearmen are slowly plodding across that bridge, but you can actually see as well, actually, that Ragnar is moving some of his units up there. So they are taking... I like the fact that they're not just bunkering up in one section of the map, to be honest with you. I like the fact that defenders are using multiple parts of the city, and that they will have to defend those parts as well because of the composition of the attackers as well. Southron Warband are going to be engaged now by Gondor infantry as they try to get their Balaguer archers out of there, the Umbar. Gondor infantry should still win this fight, I would suggest. I mean, they're actually in a narrow formation, so the Southrons could actually collapse in on them, and then they might win that fight, actually. But with several units of infantry coming in here, the very light Southrons will ultimately end up getting blown through, especially with Citadel Guard, but also they were taking some friendly fire in the back from their fellow Haradrim there, which is not going to be great for them. Their armour, obviously, is nothing compared to the crafts of the Gondorians, I should say. Yeah, having just one unit of spears there is a little bit of an inexperienced move. I think he's got a lot of undefended archers back here as well. So they clearly weren't prepared for Gondor to suddenly switch into being fully offensive, which you always should be as the defenders. You should always think, what if they decide to go forward in numbers now? Similar thing happening over here. You can see some Gondor spearmen have pushed forward. It's the fully upgraded ones that Steward of Dale has as well. Not quite as devastating perhaps, but it does at least mean that this unit of Southron Warband can't be redeployed to the other front, which is very good for them. Yeah, Gondor, they're on the march now. I mean, Harad are patching the gap now. They've got some Trollmen, they've got some Muhard Beast Tamers. But they're going to need some support here. Umbar can't afford to just sort of sit here and watch this happen. They do need to get in here and give Harad a bit of support, and you can tell now as well that very nice positioning there from the Gondorian ballista across the way from Steward of Dale, shooting right along this line. Perfect positioning, really. If that was by design, then that's very well done, because if they can kill those Trollmen with the ballista, all the better, albeit they do risk a bit of friendly fire on their own Citadel Guard, but I think they take that trade, to be honest. Most of what makes Harad scary in this fight is in their various Trollmen units, as it will be in any matchup against Gondor, really. They are pushing forward a little bit now. Yeah, very nice shot, though. Balakith marksmen firing in to the Pelagia Marines as they move forward, but the momentum is with Gondor here. The question is whether they can keep this assault going. They have reinforcements near enough by, I think, especially with Mornhedel coming forward with some more standard spears. They definitely weren't prepared for that, though, were they? And they're actually going after the Trollman now, and Mason realises the danger that his units are in, and he is trying to pull them away, but they're getting caught a little bit on the level geometry there. And again, it's only a single unit that's in the way here. They're trying to pull through the Citadel Guard, this unit, which will leave them taking a bit of damage, but they need more substantial front lines than singular units. Combined arms is the name of the game. And they desperately need to set the table a little bit better than this, the defenders, because they can't afford to fall behind in the early stages. This should be when the defenders are arguably at their strongest, and while Umbar aren't really losing anything, you can't afford to just cut off Harad like a diseased limb, because the strengths that they offer your defence here... I don't really know what the cavalry was trying to accomplish by coming up here, but there is cavalry corpses nonetheless. Serpent Guard standing victoriously over the conquered dead. Fountain Guarded there. Ragnar's got some of his archers into a nice position. Yeah, I don't know. If they never intended to really defend this area properly, either his Umbar allies should have told Harad to never bother setting up a defence over here, because these units will just end up being wasted, or if they did intend to defend over here, Umbar should maybe have committed forward earlier, because then they could have held behind these buildings over here, and that would have been far more beneficial. Gondor archers taking some damage from the Balakeths in behind. The Balakeths will out-skirmish the Gondor archers, certainly, especially without the upgrades, but this is good from Gondor, because this will ultimately take the pressure off their infantry when it comes to ranged units. And Umbar are not going to move forward and reinforce this position now, because it's getting slaughtered by the ballista across the way. Well, Belagaia footmen are coming in here. Again, if they were going to come in to reinforce, it really should have been slightly sooner, I think. The South ones have already taken a lot of losses. The Gondorian spearmen have also taken a few losses, though, because of the AP. A lot of these arrows are pretty inaccurate, which means it's going to be Belagaia archers, it's going to be Southron archers. You can also see marksmen of Caer Andros doing their thing. I like the way the attackers have started this fight, though. They put the pressure on immediately, and they're not going to let up now, and so far the defenders, I have to say, have been a little bit sluggish in their response. Like, at this point, the decision has to be made. Do we pull back to sort of defend this area here, which you do need to, because you've got so many units locked in here now, and eventually there is going to be an attack coming from this way, and it's going to be very difficult to organise a retreat from multiple directions, and you'll also split your army in half if you allow the attackers to have this entire middle section between the two pieces of raised city. But I think consolidating would be a better idea here, because they're certainly not really doing a particularly good job at putting on a significant defence down here. Now, what could turn this around is a rather intangible factor of how much damage all of these archers are doing. So you can see Belagaia, Southron, Balaketh. None of them are especially damaging individually, especially not to the more heavily armoured forces of Gondor. But they will ultimately be slowly trickling that damage in. But this is why it was important, like I said, for Mornhedel to come over here and help Steward of Dale more so than go around the back with the other two. Because this means that they have a lot more... They have more of an ability to keep this assault going for longer. So meanwhile, dismounted Serpent Guard in here. They would beat standard Gondor infantry, certainly as depleted as them, but Citadel Guard are a bit of a different matter. These units are fairly depleted, though, after being the ones to sort of really take the bull by the horns early on. Pelagian Marines are trying to move forward. I don't think they've used their ammunition, unless they have. I mean, there's a lot of dead trollmen there, which might suggest that those Pelagian Marines used their jabbies on them, because the ballista wasn't firing continuously throughout that whole engagement there. Belagaia footmen are now moving backwards. Meanwhile, Gondor cavalry thinking about moving in again. What have we got over here? We have, there's another little engagement over here between the Beast Tamers and the Southron Warband. I mean, the Haradrim will most certainly be victorious in that fight against a single unit of Athalon men-at-arms, but these units could also find themselves cut off sooner rather than later. I think the entirety of the Dol Amroth army is over here, however, which means Gondor is going to be the one having to pile on the pressure for two of the major choke points back here. Dismounted Serpents taking a bit of a charge there from the Gondor cavalry, which seemed to be more successful than the Pineth Galens last time. This is a pretty key moment of the fight, though. You can see here Gondor spearmen There are javelins now being utilised as well, though. The Muhad Beast Hunters firing into those Gondor spears. I mean, at this point, though, Gondor overextending a little bit, I think, Steward of Dale. He didn't need to move in immediately. He could have waited until more reinforcements arrived, but it is a key moment for the attackers, this, because they need to keep this assault going at this point. All of the same vulnerabilities still exist for the defenders. They're a little bit slow, a little bit plodding. Those Balaguir archers allowed themselves to get engaged by Gondor spearmen, but there is a danger here that all of these units on the front line start to rout now for the Gondorians because of the odds that they are now facing. They are depleted, they're continuously facing off against fresh units as well. I'm not sure. Mournhead Elves coming in here with some Gondor infantry to reinforce. Southron pikemen really making a mockery of those axemen of the Sarnak, and they will continue to do so. So this is a bit of a saving grace now. I mean, you can see those Gondor archers are doing a very nice job, as well as the ballista are firing into those beast hunters. A fresher unit of Citadel Guard here, in and amongst all of these Umbar and Serpent Guard. You can also see some Alcarondas Legion are now being committed forward. The Gondorian archers are in place, and they will be able to do a good amount of damage, especially to the Haradrim that they perceive. More infantry coming across as well, so I like this, more reinforcements. So they are getting reinforcements here. This assault will not fall apart before the reinforcements arrive. There's some Axemen of the Sarnak up here now as well, which is just the reinforcements that the spears needed. Adding in a nice dash of damage. Yeah, these are just archers. There's no infantry over here to defend the archers, and if Ragnar has only sent archers up here, he's got his catapult as well. If he's got no infantry units that he can use to defend, he is in a significant amount of trouble, because Gondor could, if I had noticed this as Gondor, I'd send another strong unit of infantry, a significant unit like a Citadel Guard, to basically go up here and really start pushing forwards, because these archers, like Southron archers, are not going to hold back the Gondorians like this for any length of time at all. Axemen of the Sarnak are here, more reinforcements on the front. Meanwhile, as we go back through here, a lot of the Umbar units finding themselves in this valley, and you can see that up until now, you have to say, it's been trading fire with one another. Veterans of Osgiliath firing in, Gondor archers firing in. Exactly the right way for Torres to play this, because most of the skirmishers are on the other side trying to deal with the units crossing the river. And yeah, this is definitely a newer player move, because he did have some Ardenaeum shield guard in there to sort of guard the front of the Balaguir pikes, but clearly when they started taking javelin fire he pulled them back, but he left the pikes there. And they are getting continuously battered, both of these units of Balaguir pikemen. Javelins being utilised, and it's not great. This is the problem, they have no real archers over here. They have some archers up here, but they clearly weren't prepared to deal with this kind of assault from Gondor over here. And the Balaketh marksmen are a good unit when it comes to skirmishing with the enemy when they are under fire, but they're not the best damage dealers, nor actually the Narun-Arus. So while they are doing damage, they're not going to do it quickly enough to save the lives of those pikes down there. Meanwhile, Harad have, well, they've been defeated over here. Yeah, they have. They've just been outright beaten. I thought they retreated, but they haven't. Dol Amroth have come forward in numbers. Once again, Mason is committing a single unit to try and hold back an entire army. It's not going to work, even a unit as strong as the Trollman. I mean, they will be able to pick up some decent kills against the Thalon men-at-arms, but ultimately, when the big guns move forward, when you get swamped by Parathil champions, it's not really going to do much. And ultimately, Dol Amroth are not going to mind if they lose a few men-at-arms and Tarnostians to get through here. I have to say, the defenders have made a bit of a pig's ear of this so far. It's not been particularly great. I think they panicked early on, and they're still trying to reorganise themselves, and it's... we'll see. I mean, over here is where they could start to maybe try and make up some ground, but even over here, Gondor's momentum still continues. Those Citadel Guard on the front line from the Steward of Dale have been continuously a problem. Ardenaeum Shield Guard are coming in to try and block their advance now. The Gondorians strong on the front line, and so far a universal problem the defenders have had is they just have not committed enough to any front line they've decided to try and hold. They've had that problem where they've simultaneously committed too much to a situation, but also not enough. Like, you can't afford to just go half and half like that. You need to go in, and this is a terrible, terrible bit of play by Ragnar. Clearly, I think what he wanted to do was put his catapult along the side of the line over here and fire into the Gondorian position, but ultimately he's ended up pushing it into range of the Gondor infantry. He's had to run away, and I mean, these Balaguir archers, they're not going to win this fight. I mean, honestly, like I said, if I was Steward of Dale, just send a singular unit of infantry up here. That catapult will never be a problem in the battle. That's a huge investment for the defenders gone. And based on the gains you've already made, that could be game, set and match already. Marksmen of Caer Andros are firing into the flank of this army. There's also the armour-piercing arrows from the Warns of Minas Ithil. So it's definitely a lot of damage being dealt here. The Athelian Rangers anywhere. It's Pelagia Marines, which is nice. There's a lot of archers up on that hill over there as well, mind you. What's going on here? The Pinnith Galens are back for another bite of the cherry. They really should get out of there quickly though, because the champions of Neferat will do horrid damage with those swords. Yeah, and I mean, unfortunate here from Mason, again, committing a unit of really important infantry in the Trollman to a situation that they were never going to be good in. It doesn't matter what unit you have in a situation like this. If you're facing down an entire army, it could be the Smiths of Eregion. Well, when I say the Smiths of Eregion, the Gwaithir Myrdain. It could be the Palace Guard from Mirkwood. It could be the Pharazim Swordmasters from Numenor. Any of those units would still have suffered the fate that the Trollmen are suffering here. And a most painful lesson, but let's hope that he takes that one to heart. I refuse to believe that anyone who's watched my videos for any length of time thinks that committing a singular unit to an engagement like that is a good idea. It's a constant pet peeve of mine, and people keep doing it. It's wild. Gondor are losing ground on the front line now though. They need more reinforcements. They need to get some more units in here. So this is where Umbar are at their strongest. All of their skirmishers are pouring fire into this location over here, and their infantry is at its strongest over here as well. So you'd hope at least that the defenders would be doing well there. Over here, meanwhile, I have to say those Balagai pikemen were really hung out to dry, and they don't have much to show for it. Torres' army, he's done the right thing here. He's the slow burn, really. Steward of Dale and Mornhadale's armies on the other side will be fairly depleted by the time he arrives, but he hasn't got many casualties to his name at this point, Torres, and he still has his Fountain Guard, all of his important units. He could come in like a wrecking ball, as they say. And they need to set up another defence over here. There's some Corsair crossbows, and I mean, it's not as if it's all over for the defenders. They still have units which they can use to great effect, but it is a problem. Like, they haven't been able to get organised even still. Fountain Guard are pushing in maybe a little too aggressively, potentially. Corsair Blackguard's firing in. Mornhadale's Fountain Guard could be a ripe target for the Demons of the Desert. Are we going to see? Yeah, the Demons of the Desert are firing in. You can see the disruption that they cause. Definitely a good target for them. So maybe Gondor getting a bit big for their boots in places, seeing the momentum that they have. And you can see over here as well, Umbar seeing they need to rescue this catapult. This catapult is one of the tools that they could really use. There is a unit of Gondor archers holding back the Balakiths as the ballista hammers the Balakith Axe Guard. And they have salvaged the situation over here. Like, they had so many skirmishers that a small detachment of Gondorians wasn't going to be enough. They can remount their catapult now, but it was a situation Ragnar should never really have put himself in. He should always have had at least a unit of Balagai footmen up here so that they could have held the line with the support of some of those archers. Instead, they've had to take a costly fight going uphill, sort of bending themselves out of shape a little bit, just in order to salvage these units. And in the end, they're going to have to get more reinforcements over here. Otherwise, another wave of troops could just as easily turn this fight around as well. Warns of Minas Ithil using their AP arrows to fire into the Alcarondas there. This frontline fight has been a very bloody one for both sides at the very least. This is where Umbar have been able to flex their muscles a little bit against the Gondorians. They are slowly winning here in the middle. But like I said, the real problem isn't really the fact that can they win from the front, because I think they probably could if they kept committing stuff, especially with catapult support. The real issue is this. Torres' army is now beginning to make its appearance, the militia leading the way, which means they're going to have to hold from both angles. If they don't, they're going to lose that entire front line. It's been a very well executed assault by the attackers, I have to say though, so far. While I think the defenders have been quite accommodating in a few areas, the attackers have still had to do things correctly, and they have. And Dol Amroth are just biding their time and waiting, because they know that most of the attackers' strength is going to be located in this little area over here. They're just waiting for Torres' army to move forward for this lower area to finish down here, and then Dol Amroth can sort of pincer in from the other side as well, meaning it will never be a one choke point fight. which if you can take that away from the defenders, it's always a good idea to do. Meanwhile, Ardenaeum on the front line. There's a few Corsair Blackguards. I guess the Corsairs are here, although the Blackguards, you don't really think of them as the same as their piratey cousins. They definitely have better equipment. There's a few units from Ragnar up here. He needs to get that catapult into a nice position. The problem is, where did the ballista go? You can see that some of the ballista bolts have done some damage to the architecture of the city. Some civilians back here, so yeah, that's got to be the general. In fact, yes, I can see him right there. Don't know where that ballista went, unless it is still across the way somewhere. Maybe I'm just blind. Maybe it's out of ammo and they committed the crew forward somewhere. Yes, that's where they are. So, I mean, that's the sign. Like, the catapult is now free to move in, and I think that is one of the best hopes at this point for the defenders. Do some really nasty damage with the catapult. As we saw last time around, Gondor are not immune to a mass rout. Now, the Witchers, the morale-shattering capabilities that they have are very substantial, but a catapult can be nearly as good. And that may very well be the best choice, especially when you can see stuff like militia infantry starting to rout here. Torres, he does need to be a little bit more aggressive than this. I mean, I think he's gotten used to the good life over here, really, in the sense that the defenders were probably the most accommodating over there, allowing him to shoot his arrows into pikes. If he pushes forward in force now, I think there's no way back for the defenders, to be honest with you. If he doesn't, though, I think the defenders can take advantage of that, because they can definitely wear down the Gondorians that cross the river in the city over here. Do a good job there. You can see what's left of the Fountain Guard being killed after the Demons of the Desert had their way with the Alcarondas Legion and some Ardenaeum Shield Guard coming in the end. Ooh, hello. Yes, a nice hit there from the catapult. Exactly what you need to see. And there is hope yet for the defenders. Like I said, they're not out of the game. They've made their lives difficult up until this point in the fight, but while I think the Steward of Dale and Mornhadel have done very well over on this side, the onus is now on the Gondorian and Dol Amroth player that attacked from the other side of the city to pick up the slack and continue to be aggressive. But the defenders, they are starting to regain their footing a bit. Pinnithgalen cavalry moving in here. There's nothing really left of Umbar down in this gap over here, though, so I mean, Gondor have technically won the fight. Corsair crossbows, if they're out of ammunition, then that's fine. If they're not, then this is, again, a bit unfortunate, because you need those bolts to be doing their thing. I think they have a very slight anti-cavalry bonus in melee, actually, the Corsair crossbows, because of those harpoons, which is kind of interesting. Again, you can see over here, very, very small amounts of troops from Harad being committed, essentially consigned to death. And yeah, these Haradrim spearmen are not going to do much in the way of damage either, so they are going to get slain by Dol Amroth, who they've still got a pretty healthy army as well, and they're going to be able to make their way up here. There's not much ready over here either to really hold the line at this point. What do they actually have left, Umbar? I mean, they're a little bit disparate. Like I said, they are now effectively cut off from one another. Ragnar's got a portion of his army in his catapult over there. There goes the Harad general. That's, again, a bizarre decision from Harad to do that in the first place, really, but such is the way of things. Dol Amroth coming in over here, but like I said, there's some Umbarim and some Haradrim over here on this side. Ragnar's got his forces over there as well, so they are now cut off from one another. But maybe this will make things easier for them. A narrower choke point that they have to hold. The Athelian Rangers look like they've used up their ammunition here from Torres, but again, like I said, he had all of the targets he could aim at with his archers, so I would assume that the ammunition was not wasted in the end. This catapult could be absolutely vital, and really not worth going after the cavalry though. One of those catapults is broken, actually. I wonder what did that then. Was it friendly fire, or was it something else? Fire arrows, perhaps? That's the only thing I can think of. The telltale rattle of crossbow bolts. Really eager to get that cavalry gone, but that cavalry is not really very much of a problem anymore. I like the fact that the Gondorians are focusing on this hill first, though. They're just sending token forces over here, and they'll deal with Ragnar later, presumably. Still has the potential to be a close fight, this, though, and it technically is. There's still civilians from Mornhadel over there. That's his general, of course, so they'll only be committed in a real pinch. Gondor archers finishing off some very depleted Ardenayam shield guard over here. Meanwhile, sounded like a winch then, like a artillery winch or crossbows. And there are the crossbows. They've got a good position here to use javelins and crossbows, and this will be a punishing climb for Gondor. Will it be enough though? I don't know. I mean, I think this is the real problem, to be honest with you. We've got like a very healthy contingent of Dol Amroth over here. Balagaya archers being engaged by Perithor champions is not what you want to be seeing if you're on the Umbar side of the fence here. Dol Amroth, I think, is just going to be able to come in and sweep away. I think all Gondor need to do is just form a nice position over here, make sure that there's no escape for Umbar so they can't try and regroup with Ragnar across the way. And then just allow Dol Amroth to go to town over here and just tear them limb from limb. Tarnostians coming in to back them up. Belfalas, I mean, you have to assume these Balagaya archers are not going to last too much longer in the melee fight. Javelins in position, what are they firing at? Yeah, very, very nice. I think at this point you can see Umbar, they're going to try and regroup with Ragnar. Ragnar is actually pushing downhill as well, because there's not much standing in his way. What does Torres actually have left? I mean, he's got a lot left, and to be honest, this should have been pushed forward quicker. And it actually may be to the point where Umbar might actually get away. They're going to take losses doing this, but I think they will be able to slip away. And there goes, I think that was Steward of Dale's general? He's over here somewhere. Oh no, it was Mornadel's general, I believe. Interesting. So yeah, Umbar are going to try and get away. This is a good move from Son of the Dunedain, I think. Because if they stay there, they're doomed. Like, they need to gamble at this point. They need to get over here. They need to form up a nice position. The catapult is pushing forward. It is interesting that Ragnar is going on the offensive. It's quite interesting to see. Sweeping aside Gondorian opposition. Narrow miss. A glancing blow. They need the catapult to do so much of the heavy lifting at this point, though. If it comes down to just a pure slogfest in melee, the fact that Torres still has Fountain Guard left, and the fact that there are still so much of the Dol Amroth pikemen left means that the phalanx favours the attackers, so they're going to need that catapult. That would be the Haradrim. So Harad are gone. It was definitely a bit of a flaky performance from Mason in command of his army, you have to say. That was a pretty decent hit there. Most of it was Gondor infantry. A few axemen. Also, in fact, enough of the axemen fell that they're actually routing, so not a bad hit at all. Arrows still being traded back and forth, as well as bolts. And those bolts will do a nice job. I mean, they're going after the Fountain Guard, I would assume. They definitely should be. As Dol Amroth and their Black Swans move forward, a nice bit of AP. Two fairly inexperienced players, though. I mean, they have the resources to win. Whether they actually will or not. I mean, this is the situation that you need to be getting your Fountain Guard out of their formation and running them. Because really it's just a case of you need to get onto the front line quickly, because the defenders still, in spite of the fact that they are doing some good things here as the game enters its final phases, they're still a little bit unorganised. And the fact of the matter is, they can't afford to just scurry off back here. Son of the Dunedain has played the game enough to know that you can't afford to just sort of cower behind your ally like this. The catapult is your key to victory. If you don't defend it, because there's no way it gets back up this hill before getting intercepted if you intend to run. If you don't defend your catapult, you're done for. You are done out here. And unfortunately, it looks as though Son of the Dunedain is going to attempt to use Ragnar as a bit of a human shield, and it's not going to work out for them if they try that. Ragnar is going to be able to pick up a decent kill count between his artillery and all of his archers that are still firing away. Not to mention his crossbowmen. All useful units. Those Belfast Marines getting absolutely dusted. One of the units of archers at least should be trying to go after something like the Doran Ernil pikemen over here. Units that are out of ammo being committed forward. It's ooh, that is a brutal, brutal hit. Very nice to see, and there's a lot of routing as well. Like I said, this is how you win the fight. Like, for me, Umbar has to just hold the line here. Like, this is the hill we die on, or at least the base of the hill we die on. And I think Son of the Dunedain probably sees that at this point. He should be sending forward his infantry in droves to try and hold them at bay. because I don't think they really have anything that can deal with that catapult anymore. Is it still got ammo? It does. Cranking up for another shot. Gondor infantry, Parathil champions. A player has admitted defeat. Is that Mornadel? It's not. It's not Torres either. So that must be Steward of Dale. So his army is completely gone at this point. That is absolutely brutal. Like I said though, like, it's such a shame. Like, Son of the Dunedain could have had his infantry here on the front line, and they could be continuing to hold. But I like the fact here that Torres recognises the problem, and he's force pathing his units through. Because the closer they get, the more awkward the shot is going to be for the catapult. But the catapult is continuing to get some really, really nice value. If they go on to lose this fight, however, I have to say that, more so than any other single move in this fight, I have to say, from Son of the Dunedain, that might be the key problem. Because you can see how easily, like, at this point they've got a lot of good units in melee, Wardens of the White Tower, Fountain Guard. They are carving through the very makeshift defence that Ragnar had put up, and the catapult is now in melee. So Torres, well actually no, it's not Torres, it's actually Filler with his Black Swan Renegades has caught the artillery. And that might be that, to be honest with you, because ultimately, if you fight here, especially on the flat ground that Son of the Dunedain has elected to position his men in, you're not going to be able to get the angle to use whatever skirmishes you have left. And like I said, in a melee slog fight, you're not going to defeat Fountain Guard. As well as Doran Ernil Pikemen. There's also Athalon Halberdiers in there, all of the phalanx units you could possibly want. As well as some nice units for more up-close and personal work, like Parathil Champions, like Wardens of the White Tower. It's going to be tough, but it is close, this fight. I think, you know, it's been interesting. Alcarondas Legion, they're going to try and come downhill now, but it's too little too late from Son of the Dunedain there. There's no way that you get that catapult back at this point. Of course, our Blackguards are going to fire a volley, and they kill off nothing by the looks of things, which is bizarre. Here come the Wardens. There's no single unit on the field at this point, I think, which is as strong as the Wardens in melee. We didn't see any Harbingers after all. They're up here, and you can see here the Tarnostians getting just forced backwards in brutal fashion by those shield bearers. And like I said, it's almost adding salt into the wound, the fact that Son of the Dunedain is electing to come forward now of all times. No matter. There's also the Wanderers of Nimrodel firing in from back there, so there is that ranger ammunition. It's not the best angle for them, so you're not going to see them rack up ludicrous kill counts like you often can, but as the rain falls, these may be the decisive blows. And it's a shame, because I think the defenders, they had put themselves into a very challenging position, and they had actually fought their way back into contention, I think. As much as Ragnar's organisational skills let him down a little bit, I think he actually ended up pulling things back quite nicely for his part. Obviously the Haradrim, their problem was just committing not enough to any front line they were involved in. They were committing single units all over the place, and the attackers were gratefully gobbling them up. The Son of the Dunedain. Yeah. Here in the late game, that was their... They may still have lost, to be honest. They may still have lost, but that was their best hope. Being on the front foot and allowing that catapult. I don't know how much ammunition the catapult still had left, but it was only firing for a little while. It definitely still had at least a third to a half of its ammunition remaining based on the amount of shots I saw. And that's substantial. That would have been enough to do horrendous damage if the shots were good into the infantry that's fighting on the front line here. More Gondor infantry on the way forward. Fountain Guard, like you can see, Fountain Guard are doing the business here. The Balakith shield bearers are trying to get in and amongst the lines, and they will do some damage with those maces, but ultimately there's only so many of them. They will be overwhelmed by the plate-clad Gondorians here. Tirithea marksmen still have a bit of ammo as well. Firing in back here. What are they actually going after, I wonder? Corsair crossbows, yeah, that's a good target. The right target as well. You can see the catapult crew actually escaped. The fact that Ragnar is preserving them leads me to suggest that maybe they do have ammo and he's holding out hope that they can get back there, but there's no way. There's no way now. The momentum has shifted for the last time, I think. As the Belfalas Marines get in behind the lines, some Doran Ernil pikemen as well, engaging this line of Balakith marksmen. Most of what the defenders have left at this point are out of ammunition skirmishers, the artillery crew. I think the one unit of dedicated infantry they have. are the Sentinels, the Naru and Aru Sentinels, which to be fair are a terrific unit of pikes, but with just under 30 of them, that is not going to be enough to secure final victory in the field. But it has been an interesting one, I have to say. I think I've been picking a few too many holes in the players, to be fair, because it has ultimately been an entertaining battle. But I think it will be a well-deserved victory for the attackers, if for no other reason than I was impressed with how Steward of Dale and Mornadale recognised the fragilities of the initial defences and ruthlessly took advantage of them. Wanderers of Nimrodel are out of ammunition, so they're going to commit themselves to melee. Well, I don't know if they have actually run out of ammunition, but they're being committed to melee anyway. Nice melee defense on Rangers, so going up against Catapult Crew, they'll be just fine. There goes yet another general. Yeah, I don't know about that. With Naru and Aru units nearby especially, like Umbar are going to be the sort of faction which most certainly fights to the bitter, bitter end. And there is still range support coming in. Dismounted Knights the Silver Swan, another good quality unit which is going to be committed to the front. Not a problem for them to deal with. Routing Gondorians. Yeah, most of what's left is Dol Amroth forces, so Torres did take a lot of damage. I think he took it on the chin when moving through the valley, and also when over here in the lower sections. Still some Gondorians here on the front, ones of the White Tower. Yeah, with another unit like this moving forward, you'd suggest it's probably all over. But like I said, this is actually very close on the front line. It's close enough to the point where I'm in no doubt at all that if they defended that catapult more fervently, that would have been the difference maker. And that the defenders could have won this battle. But such is the way of things. Yeah, these Naru and Aru Royal Guard really need to be in melee. They probably should have been in melee already, to be honest, but I mean, not that it makes too much of a difference now. With the arrival of what's left of Dol Amroth's strength in melee, it's already too late. I do like the Silver Swan Knights, mounted and dismounted. Some may think they look a little ostentatious, but I do enjoy them. Those Gondor infantry will probably fall away pretty quickly. Good thing for them, really, they had all these Dor and Ernil pikes, because while they're not as good as the Sentinels, they were at least able to answer the phalanx with one of their own. It's a single Parathil champion over here. Don't know where the rest of his unit is. It says there's 9 others. Well, they're in there, scattered about. Some more crossbow bolts finding their marks, but yeah. It's going to be a slow and painful death here for the Black Numenorians. And Gondor and Dol Amroth, the dynamic duo, victorious here. And they're going to try and just finish off these Balakath marksmen before helping out on the front line against those Naru and Aru Royal Guard. They will take some killing after all. Very heavily armoured spears. Not exactly the damage-dealing heroes that are needed in a situation like this. More crossbows coming in. They still have some Tirathair marksmen. A couple of units of them. Close to 150 of them as well. In addition, should they be required in melee, which that's going to be too much at this point. Fire arrows I wouldn't actually suggest, because the Naru and Aru, I don't know if Phila knows this, the Naru and Aru are locked morale, so you're not going to break them with fire arrows. Your only choice is to kill them. And fire arrows, you do run the risk potentially of breaking your own men. Which obviously is the last thing you want. Let's go up to ×2 speed, I think. Yes, indeed. Smashing the foe. Went a bit Sean Connery there for a second. And that is the final general. The result of this battle has not been in doubt for some time at this point, as the Dor and Ernil archers close in on their quarry. Finishing off the crossbows. Wardens of the White Tower still alive and well. Actually no, there's a fountain. Well, there are wardens in there as well, only 17 of them. Going to completely surround them. I wonder how Gondor and Dol Amroth would intend to model Umbar, or remodel it. I think maybe Dol Amroth would make better use of it, a naval port such as it is. Umbar, twinned with a Thalond. bright blue sails fluttering in the breeze. Gondor have probably got enough to manage at this point anyway. Can't imagine that this would be a particularly peaceful existence, though. The Southrons would be constantly raiding your lands if you were to actually take Umbar, but I think maybe on the defence, Gondor and Dol Amroth would be a fairly insurmountable foe. Still sentinels there, and here you can see the fate of the Royal Guard there for all to see. And they will be overrun. Will be those sentinels that outlast the Royal Guard then. Well. And yeah, I mean it's pretty much 10%. 89. I don't think unless these. I don't think they're going to be able to though. But still a close fight, and like I said, it could have gone the other way because I mean there's not a huge amount of elites here. Bruised Fountain Guard. There's dismounted Knights of the Silver Swan were committed later, but also very depleted Wardens of the White Tower as well. The rest of it is all basic stuff, which could have been fairly easily routed, I think, to be brutally honest. What is going on here? Oh, I see. This is the guy, is it? Here he is with his pike. I guess this is his house. And he wants to die next to it, defending his land, specifically, rather than just that of his people. A bop on the head there by one of the Horse Guard's swords. I mean, he's going to be able to skewer some of these. Yeah, each poke he makes is going to be enough to kill off one of these Horse Guard. But see how slowly the Black Swan Renegades are moving at this point because of how tired they are, but a single charge is going to be enough here. Mace is raised, and there they go. All the bones in his chest broken. Yeah. Very nice battle, I have to say. Probably one of the most enjoyable battles I've seen actually on Umbar. There is one I remember quite fondly where it was a scenario where it was like genuinely laying siege to the city. There was a Mumakil phase outside it as well, which was probably my favourite on this map. But other than that, in terms of a regular game on this, where the city is almost divided in half right from the beginning between the two sides, I think this is probably the best one I've seen in terms of enjoyability anyway. Like I said, there's room for improvement, I think, for quite a lot of the players in terms of what they did in this battle. I have to say, I think while Ragnar definitely started the game flaky, like I said, as it went on, he actually probably improved to be the best player on his team, if I'm being brutally honest. I think Son of the Dunedain, again, it was that moment where he put all of his units back here, effectively using his ally as a human shield. If he'd been willing to help defend those catapults, it could very well have gone the other way. Especially with the Naren Aru Sentinels to hold the line. If you'd managed to rout off some of those pikes with close range catapult fire, which they were doing a tremendous amount of damage, then it could have worked. But credit to Torres as well, because he pushed through the lines and shut down that catapult as quickly as he could, as well as Filler. I think the attackers overall, in terms of timing, deserved the win, because Steward of Dale and Mornhadel were very good when they were being very aggressive. Filler, he bided his time well. Like I said, he hung back, but for the good of his team, it was the right thing to do, because when he committed himself, it was exactly the right time. It left Umbar with nothing to do other than to try and make a risky escape, which they did manage. But then, following on from that, obviously they then did not commit themselves to defend the catapult. Like I said, Torres, maybe he could have been a little bit more. He could have been a little bit swifter in moving in. If he was, then he would have been able to block off Son of the Dunedain from retreating over to the other side in the first place, and it would have been probably a more substantial victory for the attackers. But you can't really argue too much. I mean, it was 11% the differential in the end, closer to 10% though, obviously. So definitely counts as a close one. But yeah, like I said, it was definitely there was definitely some improvements to be had from a play perspective. But I think in terms of the entertainment value of the replay, it was a very good one. So let's see what did the damage for the Gondorian armies. Torres' army, his Athelian range has got 160. His army was committed later, it's worth saying, and also a lot of his skirmisher damage actually probably came in the early phases when he just had sort of free reign to shoot into stuff like the Balagaya pikemen. He was taking damage from on high from Balakith Marksman, but to be honest with you, it was a very worthwhile trade for him out there. One that you're always going to take. Steward of Dale, several units breaking 100, I think. 168 is the most. So yeah, his Veterans of Osgiliath got the most, so they were able to get some good kills from range. And then in melee, of course, their enhanced abilities doing well. Good use of the Ballista as well. It really made those frontal positions untenable. Axemen of the Sarnak, very different very differing fates. Wards of Minas Ithil did very well. Those armor-piercing arrows used to good effect. And the Wards of the White Tower are also really doing some good things in melee. The Pinneth Galen Cavalry actually also racked up a good kill count across the battle. So those cycle charges they were doing here and there actually were adding up to be something really good. And Morn Hedel, a few of his units getting over 100 as well. His Gondor Archers actually getting the most. His Nimlothian Honor Guard doing the business in melee. Obviously a big fan of that unit. And Pelagia Marine. So a lot of the supporting units. Fountain Guard also. So split between what you'd expect to do the damage for Gondor. The really nice high-end armor-piercing spears. And the skirmishers. More of an intangible factor throughout the battlefield. But like I said, in a battle, especially where Umbar and Gondor are the two more dominant factions, when it comes to a skirmish fight, both sides are going to cancel out most of each other's strengths. So I always felt like the battle would have been won based on positioning, and that is something that the attackers definitely punished the defenders for. So yeah, big thank you to the Steward of Dale for sending me this battle replay, and a big thank you to all of the players for being a part of this very entertaining game. Like I said in the last battle, the channel update should probably already be out by now, so I won't keep harping on about it, but by now at least, I don't know it as I am now in the present, but you in the future should have an idea about what the schedule is going to be moving forward. Obviously with the resurgence of the dreaded Rona, things have become a little bit trickier again, so it might be that the channel update is sort of later, in which case it's probably a little bit more recent to this video than it was initially planned to be, but by that point the schedule should be largely sorted out. The amount, obviously, like I keep saying, is not going to change. It's just going to be a matter of positioning and when I'm able to do it, which may also have an impact on the length of the streams that I'm able to do, but ultimately it won't impact it too greatly. I think we should be okay from that perspective. But like I said as well, always on the lookout for more replays like this as well. Always very, very welcome on the channel, because it is the channel's lifeblood after all. It's a little bit easier to do things in the way that I am now. Again, I've reached the end of my backlog, as it were, once more, because this is the only battle that I had on it for the time being. So if anyone has anything more they wish to send, obviously sieges are always a little bit more popular, as it were. People want to watch them a little bit more. Themed ones as well, but really now that I'm doing things in this way, like I said last time, it's more likely that as long as it's not just a really small, really basic battle where one side is dominant, as long as someone's not just showing off in a 1v1, chances are I'm going to be able to show it on the channel now, because I've got on top of my backlog at long last, and I can sort of record as and when I get them and quickly crank them out in that way. So while it may be 3 to 4 weeks until these replays are actually shown by whoever is sending them to me, they will ultimately get shown, whereas in the past a few did fall through the cracks, which is obviously a bit of a shame. But yeah, now that's less of a problem. So yeah, hopefully by the time this video comes out, the overall organisation of the channel will be a little bit clearer to me and to you, and we'll be moving forward from there. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.